Yeah, I remember I was watching online church and got a text from one of our young people that some looting was happening on 26th Street.
As things were being pushed back this way, folks swooping down on 26th Street right by that shoe store,
Yep.
right? And trying to find who was connected with that, right?
And I would say that was one of the heaviest weeks in the work we've ever had. Man, I remember a moment we were at Cermak and Spalding, and there was about 200 guys from the neighborhood and about 100 cops. And it was tensions high on Cermak, and we had to mediate down kind of the conflict. You had cops in full riot gear, you had the guys revving up trucks, and we were able to calm the situation, but then immediately after had a shooting. 13 shots rang out.
Yeah, right.
I remember a moment at 23rd and Millard. Remember we pulled together all the outreach workers, black and brown, across the neighborhood and said, hey, we got to do something different.
Right.
And then you and I had the idea about doing, what if we did the black and brown march together?
Right.
And so we started with hundreds in Little Village. You started with hundreds in North Lawndale.
Right.
And man, the most powerful moment was when we met right there at 19th and Pulaski.
That was so.
It was beautiful.
The energy from that, man, was so authentic in a context like, this is who we know we are. This is who we know we are.
Yep. One of the most powerful moments to me was when we took those 9 minutes on a knee in silence and remembering George Floyd's murder.
Yeah.
But then also that was the birthplace of One Lawndale.
Yep,
And so we have North Lawndale, largely African American, South Lawndale, largely Mexican.
Yep.
And bringing and saying, hey, we're going to eliminate this line of North and South Lawndale and create this One Lawndale group.
And it's not so much even about catching it before something happens. It's about, let's do this because it's supposed to be done.
Phil and I, we live in the West Side youth development, violence intervention world. That's what we've been doing for decades.
Yeah, and now 2 years, we'd work with both black and brown students, foster kids in the system, kids in juvie, kids on the street, kids in school, and met for 2 years to figure out why each other thinks that way. Where's that history of that kind of discrimination?
And then when we go to the margins with our young people who have been pushed there by systems and things around.
Yeah, and then going deeper in that aspect of it, where those marginalized folks on both ends, right, are able to come together and recognize, the shared pain, the shared injustices that we face, and the reality of the shared hope of what that impact can really make.
When you stand with them on the margins, you then effectively eliminate the margins.
As I entered into LGC, which I was humbled and grateful to be a part of, because who am I? I'm this cat on the west side of Chicago doing this work and being honored to be a part of it, recognizing that, my fear level of folks in these corporate spots is there, but recognizing their effort to discover and be honest and truthful. It tore down a lot of that inhibitedness, if you will, to be able to approach people with what we do and bringing the value of what we do for me.
But then we take the framework of LGC, hey, those different perspectives and teachings and trainings, and we use the same framework for our young people.
Yeah.
So we have a monthly theme where we're teaching them and guiding them on different things.
Oftentimes this work within the hood, there's a weaker, stronger mentality, whether it's a race issue, black and white, or whether it's an economic issue. And for me in this kind of work, trying to tear some of that down, but yet I got to do my own work to say, wait a minute, I do feel weaker, stronger. But LGC helped me to find the fact that I am equal. We are, co-laborers in this work.
So if we think of this past year, the food distribution that blew up, and as we think about even this week, how do we get more food from the Little Village site to the Lawndale site, or taking the gifts that you guys have with the creative arts, with hip hop, things like that, and then framing those in the events we have this summer. Exactly. So it's taking the best of who we are, but bringing it to the table for the sake of the whole table.
Right.
And then how do we heal together? And so that's what we're thinking through, is the idea of healing the divide, healing together, both North and South Lawndale, for that vision of One Lawndale together.
What gives me hope and the strength of all of our communities are the doggone people. The people are so resilient. The strength of the people is so powerful. And though complications and situations come back, it's the people that rise up. It could be a drop over here that creates a storm over there, but it's the people that rise up. I mean, Dr. King said, our lives begin to end the moment we become silent about things that matter. Well, we got some folks that are not silent and that are really vocal with their presence and vocal with their words.
Yeah, for me, it's the strength, power, and resiliency of our young people.
That's the power of our history together. That's the power of us working together. We're steeped in those relationships, and that's how we move forward. As far as I'm concerned, we move forward based on those relationships, based on that trust that we built. But then we've got a whole new generation to build with as well.
So I think in the midst of everything we've been through this past year, it's the young people who've been leading the way, and I'm ready to follow them.
Yeah.
so many people commented how hard it was and cried, frankly, to see kids standing in line at Wrigley Field, not to go watch a baseball game, but to get food because they didn't have any to eat at home, right? Like that in America, in Chicago, I don't know that that should be happening. We saw that happen so much this year. People who never had to turn to a food pantry before or to any kind of assistance suddenly found themselves without a job. Maybe they were in the hospitality industry or the travel, hard-hit industry. Maybe both parents were working and now neither are, right? And so there was a lot of pride, overcoming of pride, to have to be able to come and ask for help. About a week or so into the pandemic, we knew immediately this was gonna impact our communities like no other. And so we had to pivot everything from inside this beautiful space to outside, and we had to pre-pack boxes, and the line started to get longer and longer, and we knew we could not continue to serve people safely and socially distanced in our own space.
We knew that we were probably not going to have baseball for at least a couple of months, and that entire friendly confines was going to be completely empty. And so why not open it up if we could?
We saw about a 400% increase in people coming to us for food. And right away, I think we were within Wrigley Field from conversation to starting, probably within about a week and a half, maybe. It was really fast.
Your team was just amazing, and I think worked really well with our ballpark operations team, which was really hungry to be of service to the city.
No pun intended. What was even more important for us, and a struggle for a lot of food pantries across the city, is to be able to have cold storage. So the fact that you had concessions and restaurants, we were able to flip that right away into cold storage for frozen protein and dairy and other, cold items. So that was critical in being able to help us scale up as quickly as we did.
Yeah, and I think because we were also used to having so many people standing outside of the ballpark, waiting to get into the ballpark, we were able to manage that traffic like no other, right?
We were able to do about 110,000 boxes of food just at Wrigley Field in the couple months we were there. I think we served about 60,000 people just out of Wrigley, and they really weren't just from up here. We saw people coming from all over. I think we had 40 zip codes in Chicago, as well as other, local suburbs.
Once Wrigley Field was up and running, I called Kate Mayer at the Greater Chicago Food Depository, another one of our LGC Network for Life members.
I can't underestimate how critical GCFD's support was for Lake Food Pantry and all the food pantries across the network to make sure that we had the food that we needed. There were supply chain challenges all throughout, and they were a great partner making sure that we had the things we needed to pack up for families up here and all across the city.
Yeah, I think once we noticed that we could use Wrigley Field to be of service to our city, we then called our other LGC friends. So Selena at American Red Cross, we did 2 blood drives.
We worked with Selena and the team at the Red Cross to do wellness checks on my team, right? We started to see a lot of secondary trauma with folks, working with clients who are experiencing food insecurity at rates they've never seen before in this city.
When we were doing the food deliveries to the hospitals, I called my good friend Leif Elsmo, who was in my class at the University of Chicago. We called Cody McSellers-McRae, who was at Amita Health.
We worked closely with Mark Ishog at Thresholds to make sure, again, he was suddenly having to shelter all of his people in place at the different Thresholds apartments.
I think when, we observed the increased need right away, it allowed us to think bigger picture too about the needs of the city.
I worked really closely with Krista Hamilton, both in food distribution. She's with Centers for New Horizons, and we did a couple pop-ups down there in partnership with Krista and then Pastor Julian at University Church.
Janae Meyer, Chicago Cares, we did food and supply drives after the social unrest.
And now, another classmate of mine, Megan Clune at Advocate, is a partner of yours in distributing vaccine right out of Wrigley too.
I think that's the beauty of the LGC network, or I like to say LGC family, right? Because there's just an inherent trust in each other.
And the best thing that any of us did during this is to not pretend like we had all the answers and to lean on each other and to try to come up with innovative solutions to really complicated challenges, right?
And I think when crises like these happen, we immediately can call even different classes, and even though there's sort of this underlying competition.
I mean, we know who the best class is.
Right, 2011. Okay.
one of the things that COVID has done has been to kind of clarify the most important questions of our life, not just in COVID times though, like period. If the most important question of COVID is like, how do I stay alive? How do I stay safe? How do I have the access that I need? Transportation's an issue. Being able to talk to a physician who I trust is an issue. Having healthcare in my community is an issue.
Use Chicago Medicine's Urban Health Initiative is our health equity arm, and part of that work is there's a cornerstone philosophy to this, which is asset-based community development. We formed a community advisory council years ago. Reverend DeShazier is the chair.
When I started to hear about access to healthcare, whether it was primary care, whether it was emergency care, lack of trauma care, and all of that. And that's how we met each other, and doing that work of advocating on our end, advocating for expanded access.
Assembling this group of leaders under your guidance, right, has been really powerful for us. Listening, adjusting, right, and then making plans together on how we build these programs, initiatives, etc., that help our community. And public health, by definition, is in community, right?
That's right.
We are a big institution, but we're also a neighbor too.
And I think that's what happened with COVID, where we had that set up already. We were used to asking each other tough questions. We were used to having these frank conversations and these candid conversations, and really making decisions together for the South Side, so that when it came to COVID, it was like, we knew to come to you.
Yeah, right.
And you knew to come to us.
Yeah, and that is how you have an impact on the South Side of Chicago. It's trust, relationships built over time, having the serious conversations, and then, you know, making it happen.
Yeah. And that's been the power of LGC, is to have that network and that sensibility that happens across that year and throughout the rest of your life, that says, like, I am going to be a part of this problem I'm looking at on the news or on my timeline right now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna figure out where I belong in this puzzle.
We have 4 Leadership Greater Chicago Fellows in our council, and countless others that are working on this. And that's not some sort of club. That's because people have an understanding of approaching sort of civic leadership and making an impact, right?
And this model is really about a mutuality, a kind of listening back and forth, a real dialogue and sharing of power. That doesn't happen in a lot of places, and has taken years for it to happen between us, but is happening right now.
Well,
you know?
it's bi-directional, right? It's
That's
an
right.
exchange.
That's
It's,
right.
And that's something that we've arrived at with our collaboration.
Yeah, so that they're not just receiving healthcare, receiving, but that also recognizing that and empowering them to make decisions about their healthcare. What do you need to see? What's going to be best for you?
You can set up a clinic. Right? But are people going to come to it? There's a bit of education that we've partnered on in this. We've done, 30 some events virtually, safely, educating around vaccines in the last month, right?
And even more listening needs to be done, and even more clinics need to be open, and even, we got a long way to go, but we've shown that like the direction we're moving in is the direction towards healthier communities.
We've put 100,000 shots in people's arms, right? And we're not done. As we go into the next phase of vaccinations, what this relationship has done is helped us with the other leaders in the community to go deep quickly, move fast.
And one of the things that I'm encouraged about is that our work is happening beyond COVID.
Yeah.
Like, we're looking forward to the end of this, and we will continue to talk about access issues and transportation and how we get people the kind of help and advocacy and support that they need and deserve.
We can do this.
Yeah,
right?
no,
I'm a firm believer, and you've made me a believer around this.
We gotta do it.
We gotta do it.
I think the reason why we connect so well, Ciere, is because of the fact you think about the brick and mortar, you think about the big picture, and so what we do in our space is think about the people.
And so when I think about Roseland, taking that same approach to authentic engagement and knowing that it's hard work and it's time consuming, but it's so important to ensure that you have all the voices at the table, all the people at the table, and so that when we start to plan and we think about housing, we think about retail, we know that this is what the community really wants. Because at the end of the day, the residents that have experienced disinvestment for decades should be the first to benefit from the new investment in the community. Roseland is overdue this level of investment, but I think there's this momentum that has been built with the work that's happened in Pullman, right? 180 acres of development, over $450 million of investment, 1,800 jobs created, public-private partnerships, national companies that have come to the neighborhood, but also small local businesses that have thrived in the community. And so we've shown like this is a viable market.
And to build upon that, what's really critical is the fact that you didn't leave anyone behind. Is that you have the residents, and the residents have a reason to lack trust, and to lack trust in terms of as they see the big developers coming into the community, the business owners that have been here 50 plus years, and so their lack of trust is based off what historically has occurred.
We think about the stakeholders that truly should benefit and keeping them at the core and having partners that are like-minded, like you at Metro. You know, we can call you and say, Audrena, we've got 60 new jobs, can you help us? To find local talent, right? I think about this development and the holistic nature of it, and I think that holistic long-term nature is why we're successful.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Ciere, is that when Chicago Neighborhood Initiative, Metropolitan Family Services work together, is that we don't just think short-term, we're thinking long-term.
When they first told me about the Quality of Life Plan, I just said, okay. And so on January, 29th, 2020, we met. And I did an e-blast and I sent it out to everybody. And then 10 o'clock came, 10:01, 10:05 came. I said, I wonder if anyone's coming. Then all of a sudden, people start coming. There was 80 plus people there. Out of 80 plus, there are organizations, residents. We have, different sister agencies, the police was involved. I mean, all the partners that you would think to develop a quality of life plan, it was there.
Although I've spent a significant amount of time in this community, this is the first opportunity that I've really had to come back and dig deep. So it's important for me to reconnect with folks who've been on the ground. Joyce, and she began to introduce me and the other fellows to a range of community members. And the first thing we did was we started doing listening. It wasn't that the community was waiting on us. They were pointing the direction that they needed to go, and we started to figure out how we contributed to that.
They see their voice really does matter. They see what they talk about inserted in our first community engagement plan. They see that. But at the end of the day, you're gonna see, we came out of this community engagement phase, this process, we was in it for 6 months, but we got it completed. But it took us as a group effort.
Part of leadership is courage. And it means having the difficult conversations. It means being frank and honest. And change requires tension if you're serious about change. So Joyce is comfortable in those conversations that require tension. She is unafraid to call folks out.
Yes, I am the leader, I'm the community organizer, I'm this, I'm that. But at the end of the day, I'm a worker. To see the best for our community. So, from 95th to the north, city limits to the south, Bishop Ford to the east, and I-57 to the west. We will develop, we are developing a quality of life plan for our community, for the Far South Chicago Coalition.
we've been through an era, especially this summer, of calling folks out, and we're moving into a time when we must call people in. We must lead with a genuine desire to be in this together. We must find it in our hearts to connect with one another as human beings, recognizing that this notion of a human hierarchy of value, it's been the backdrop. It's in the air we breathe, and it is our collective job. If in fact democracy is going to survive, we've got to learn how to value the lives of others and value the lives of ourselves and value the planet that we live on.
Our nation and our city need to reckon with the fact that racism has affected and affect every aspect of our society. And that people need healing, right? Especially with the harms that white supremacy have caused Black, brown, and indigenous people. So the Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation model is really a compilation of efforts that happen around the globe in 20 different countries where societies wanted to really change not only the narrative of minorities in that country, but really transform the systems to be able to ensure that everybody could live in human dignity. In order for systems to change, we need to shift the power relationships with people within those institutions, and the circles allows that power shift to happen, not from confrontational, but from the connection that people make with each other.
We have lots of policy papers and PowerPoints, right, that tell us what needs to happen in community. Right. But a lot of times they seem to fall apart because humans have to enact them. It doesn't mean that the policy side, it doesn't mean that the strategy side isn't important. It's critically important. But we have to focus just as much on the implementation and the human piece of this. And I think that's what we're seeing through this healing work, is that it really is helping to bring people together so we can actually implement the strategies and the policies that we all know are right for our community.
They might be coming at it from two different points of view, but it's the same thing. And that is the shift in the hearts and the minds that I think we need to focus a little bit more on, because that is how we change institutions and that's how systems transform.
Jose, you and I were in a circle recently that a number of the folks that were in it were in very significant roles. And one of the things that struck me is, as we were talking about our experiences, our fears, our excitement, was the number of people, myself included, who talked about what we couldn't do. Kind of our feelings that we just couldn't figure out the answer, or we didn't feel like we had the power or the authority or the ability to get a certain initiative done or change made that we wanted to get done.
And it was that expression of deep pain, anger, and sorrow that allowed somebody else to say, I'm here for you because I've also shared that, and we're going to do this together. And to me, that was just an incredible experience that I see over and over again. When people become that vulnerable, then they make a commitment to each other to change it.
No, I think that's the vulnerability of this is the key, and that's the hard part, right? You've done literally hundreds of these. Getting people to be vulnerable in the moment, which then allows for that person to invite the other in.
Over the last year, we've reached over 3,000 people. We've been working with over 100 organizations, everything from neighborhood associations and Black clubs to city departments in the city of Chicago, corporations and business people, and obviously foundations and nonprofits who have been in the front lines of doing the work during the pandemic and have used the circles as a way to process what's been going on.
I think the intersection between LGC and the healing work has been really cool to see, because so many LGC fellows and Daniel Burnham fellows are leading important institutions. But ultimately, it's the individual who has to talk about this work. It's the individual who has to move it forward. And so having that support and kind of camaraderie with one another has been really critical.
And this is a methodology that really the connective tissue to bring all the players together, be able to build those relationships, and take the leadership from the people on the ground to be able to implement and execute that strategy.
In the last couple of years, we've seen a great acceleration of that strategy. And I think a large part of that has been the trust that's been built among our team with each other.
The shortest line between two people is a story. And transformation is when we are able to share a story about each other and learn from each other in our shared wisdom.
I think this is a great example of what happens when there's urgency and the right pressure is put on our government to respond, our private sector, folks who really want to make a difference.
When you came knocking on the door, Daniel, saying let's join forces on some research that could really move to action quickly, that was a chance to live out values, our shared values.
So we called everyone in our network to understand where they are, and what we kept hearing over and over again from families was they were worried about putting food on the table, they were worried about rent, and many of the families we were working with, some of them had both parents lose their job overnight. And so coupled with that was this gap in internet access.
I think it was May or April actually, 2020, that the data collaborative, shared the results about how many communities were disconnected and how many families were stranded from learning resources because of lack of internet connections and digital access. And 2 months later, the philanthropic and government and corporate partners came together with a $50 million fund.
We had originally set a goal of 100,000 students and 60,000 households being served. We're now at just over 62,000 kids and over 42,000 households, which is
amazing.
Big. Yeah.
Daniel, one of the things that made this partnership fun was how fast we were able to see action following the research.
The impact from the internet program has really transcended just kids getting their education. Like, we're seeing really great attendance rates with the student population that we're serving. We're serving that population we need to, but we're also seeing families that were, I think a third of them were unemployed, are now using it to look for job opportunities.
Right.
So
it's so encouraging that Chicago Connected has had the impact of changing who's around the table and who's helping inform decisions, because I see that rippling out into lots of other things.
When we think of policy solutions, when we think of ways of handling these challenges, we think of the grassroots, we think of the folks in neighborhoods who have knowledge, who know what they need, and don't often have a voice in this. And so thinking about from the human scale, how can we build power from the ground up so the solutions aren't just coming top down, that we really consider the lived perspective.
In building the program in those first 6 weeks, one of the things that was very clear early on is we were building trust as a team. So this is Comcast, RCN, the different internet service providers, the city, CPS, Kids for Chicago, and some of the community-based partners that were there. As we built trust, there was a recognition that this program could be much better if we let the people who were directly impacted sit with us. Everyone was on board with this idea of community-based partners need to be here, parents need to be in the room.
Yeah.
This is a collective.
When we think about how state dollars or federal funding flow is going to get distributed, there's a new realization that the typical decision makers and power brokers isn't serving us well. And so if Chicago Connected can be this prototype for power sharing and a different kind of process for challenging the status quo and for disrupting it, I think that's an amazing legacy.
There's 35 community-based partners that are part of this, and they have not only the initial task of getting as many people connected as possible and breaking through that trust barrier, but they are now rolling out digital literacy programs for the whole family.
It's one of the things that LGC, I think, has supported a lot of us in doing, is rethinking how we show up, how we listen, how we share power, how we make decisions, how we distribute resources.
I think one of the things that LGC is doing a really good job of training people around is this idea of how do you get to those directly impacted and allow them to kind of lead the work. But one of the things I think is naturally challenging is that we are trained in the United States from birth to A, be perfect, and human-centered design is all about making mistakes and iterating and learning from the mistakes, so prototyping. And we're also trained to think from here's the solution and backwards map into that, but we put the solution out there rather than actually talking to the people that the solution's meant to serve.
Because sometimes we get caught up in, well, this is the piece of legislation, or this is the right approach, but the wisdom is in our families here, is in our residents.
Yep. I think the answer, the wisdom's literally right in front of us.
we were looking at how do we recruit a diverse population into the company, and I can literally see Harold Washington College from my window. I look straight down Lake Street and I can see it, and we had never hired anyone from there.
Your phone call to me to say this is an opportunity, we're going to seize it, we're going to do it, gave me great confidence, because you need the corporate sector to be there.
So whenever you start something big, the pull, especially when it's something that's public or something that's involved with government, is to make the big announcement, put a huge number on it and have the press conference. But that puts you in this box, and we can't fail because we already told you what we're going to succeed. So we already got the credit for succeeding.
We want our electeds and people like myself that lead institutions to get immediate results.
Yeah.
In a way that are tangible. And yet the biggest impacts come from sustained efforts that are well thought through, that require experimentation, that have some success and have some failure built in.
And there's always a risk from departing from the norm.
It's a vulnerability.
Sure.
It's a vulnerability. You're exposing yourself, right? In some respects, and I think that's where the power of transformation comes. It's when we're willing to be a little bit vulnerable, a little bit open, a little more willing to share the messes that we have in our institutions, right?
I was very comfortable taking it slow, so was Juan. And we learned a lot along the way. And that's what I think has been the biggest gift, because now we have a solid foundation in Chicago. We have 54 employers, we have 1,000 apprentices, and we're expanding to 6 cities around the country.
What I think about is that in this moment where companies had to make critical decisions about what they were or weren't going to continue to do, they have not just continued with the apprenticeship program, but they're growing their investment in it, right? And what it says to me is, at the end of the day, it's delivering a business value.
I feel like we've kind of entered this field of dreams like thing. We built it never knowing that in 2020 and 2021 we would be at such a moment in our country where for the first time so many people are confronting the true and ingrained disparities of opportunity that exist for people who are not white. And so this was a moment where, candidly, the people who are interested in looking at something different from a recruiting perspective is much greater.
The relationship that we had that preceded this, was really important. The relationship we forged at LGC was really important to make sure that, I had trust and confidence in you, that you would not spill the beans, and you had trust and confidence in me, that I would not spill the beans.
When the time comes where, again, you're in this situation that you might have never seen coming, and you have the opportunity to be bold and to take a risk, the existing relationship of LGC, the network of LGC that exists, I think in many ways de-risks that decision to be bold. It de-risks that decision to innovate, because you've got this history, but you also have a wide network of people from whom to engage.
I went in, I was passionate about my community and my city, without question, but leaving it, and then every subsequent year after that, you feel even a greater level of responsibility, if you will. And I think that's what we're bound by, right? We're bound by this collective responsibility and vision and sense of possibility for our city.
If you looked at the Venn diagram overlap of companies in the Apprentice Network and companies that support LGC by sending a fellow, I just know off the top of my head it's incredibly high, because it's that thread of civic leadership that goes through, that I've appreciated.
And because we're bound by that, we're just not going to let each other down when we're working with each other.
That's right.
Okay? That's because if I let you down, I'm letting a fellow down. And if I let you down, I'm letting our collective sense of what's possible in our city down. And we've gone through an experience where, we know that this place we call home and that we love can be so much better than it is. And it's not right now.
No.
And we can do things to change that.
Thank God I'm alive now, I'm trying to live. I wake up and high five like we little kids. Then we off into the fire, so whatever will, let it be, I will be still. And that's me, and I